The moon hung heavy and full above the sacred grove of the Grey Root Pack, its silver light casting long shadows through the ancient oak trees. Tonight was the night of bonding, when fated mates would finally unite under the blessing of the moon goddess. Orin Silverwood stood at the edge of the gathering circle, his heart hammering against his ribs, as he watched the other unmated wolves preparing for the ceremony that would change their lives forever. At 21, Orin was considered old for an Omega who had not yet bonded. His slender frame and gentle nature had made him a target for whispers and speculation throughout his life, but tonight none of that mattered. Tonight, he would finally claim his destined mate and take his rightful place in the pack hierarchy. The pull in his chest had been growing stronger for months, leading him inexorably toward one wolf in particular. Chiron Shadowclaw stood on the opposite side of the bonfire, his massive alpha frame silhouetted against the dancing flames. Everything about him screamed power and dominance, from his broad shoulders to the way other wolves instinctively stepped aside when he passed. He was the pack's strongest warrior, destined to become the next alpha when the current leader stepped down. And according to the ancient bond that thrummed between them, he was meant to be Orin's mate. The pack elder raised his staff, and the gathered wolves fell silent. Tonight, under the blessing of the full moon, those called by fate will step forward and claim their eternal bonds. Let no wolf stand between what the moon goddess has decreed. Orin felt the familiar tingle of the mate bond intensify, the invisible thread that connected him to Chiron beginning to glow with silver light. This was the moment he had dreamed of since he first understood what it meant to have a fated mate. He took a tentative step forward, then another, his bare feet silent on the soft earth. Around the circle, other wolves were moving too, drawn to their destined partners by forces older than memory. Orin's eyes found Karen's across the fire, and for a heart-stopping moment, he saw something flicker there. Recognition, perhaps, maybe even desire. The silver thread of their bond became visible in the moonlight, stretching between them like spun starlight. Orin reached out his hand, fingers trembling not with fear but with anticipation. After years of feeling like an outsider in his own pack, he was finally about to find his place, his purpose, his home. And then everything shattered. "I will not bind myself to an Omega who cowers at every shadow." Karen's voice boomed across the grove, loud enough for every wolf present to hear. His words hit Orin like physical blows, each one more devastating than the last. "The pack needs strength, not weakness. I reject this bond." The world seemed to slow as Orin watched Chiron reach up and grasp the silver thread that connected them. His face was hard, emotionless, as if the tender moment they had shared just seconds before had never existed. With one sharp motion, he tore the bond apart and cast the broken pieces into the fire. The pain was indescribable. It felt like someone had reached into Orin's chest and ripped out half his soul, leaving jagged edges that burned with every breath. Through the shock and agony, he could hear the gasps and murmurs of the gathered pack, their emotions a chaotic symphony of surprise, pity, and embarrassment. "Orin." The elder's voice was gentle, but Orin could hear the disappointment underneath. "Return to your place. The moon goddess works in mysterious ways." Somehow, Orin managed to move his feet, to step back from the fire and fade into the shadows at the edge of the grove. He watched as Chiron stood tall and proud, unmarked by what he had just done, while Orin felt like he was dying from the inside out. The ceremony continued around him, but he was no longer part of it. He was nothing, a rejected Omega, a failed mate, an embarrassment to his pack. The days that followed were a blur of shame and isolation. Word of Orin's rejection spread through the pack like wildfire, and everywhere he went, he felt the weight of their judgment. The pack council met in emergency session to discuss what to do with him. An Omega without a mate, especially one who had been publicly rejected, was seen as unstable, potentially dangerous. "You bring dishonor to the Silverwood name," his father told him bluntly when Orin tried to seek comfort at the family den. Marcus Silverwood had always been a hard man, more concerned with pack standing than with his son's well-being. "Your presence reminds everyone of our family's weakness, of our failure to produce a worthy Omega. Perhaps it would be better if you found somewhere else to live." The rejection from his own father cut deeper than even Karen's public humiliation. Oren's mother had died when he was young, leaving him with only Marcus's cold disapproval for comfort. Now even that meager support was being withdrawn. They took away his family name first. He was no longer Oren Silverwood, he was just Oren, unaffiliated, unwanted. Then they came for his dwelling, the small cabin on the outskirts of Pack territory that had been his sanctuary. He watched from a distance as they set it ablaze, the flames consuming everything he owned, every memory of the life he had built. The other Omegas who had once been his friends now crossed the street to avoid him. They feared that association with a rejected mate would bring them bad luck, would mark them as undesirable to potential alphas. The alphas were worse. Some mocked him openly, while others looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust that made his skin crawl. "Maybe if you had been stronger," one of them said as Oren passed by the training grounds, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe if you had fought for what you wanted instead of just standing there like a wounded deer." But what was he supposed to have done? Forced Chiron to accept a bond he didn't want? Begged him to reconsider while the entire pack watched? The laws of fated mates were clear. Both parties had to willingly accept the bond. He couldn't make Chiron want him. After a week of this treatment, Oren made the only choice he had left. In the dark hours before dawn, he gathered the few possessions they hadn't burned and slipped away from Pack territory. He headed for the Forest of the Forgotten, a wild place where exiles and outcasts went when they had nowhere else to turn. The forest was ancient and deep, its trees so old and massive that they blocked out most of the sunlight even at midday. Strange creatures lived in its depths, things that had once been human or wolf but had been changed by old magic and isolation. It should have been terrifying, but after what he had endured, the prospect of facing monsters seemed almost peaceful. Oren found shelter in a cave on the first night, using his remaining supplies to build a small fire. As he sat staring into the flames, he thought about Karen's words. Was he really so weak, so worthless, that even his fated mate couldn't bear the thought of being bound to him? The pain of rejection was still fresh, a constant ache in his chest where their bond should have been. But as the days passed and he learned to survive in the wilderness, something began to change inside him. Away from the constant judgment and pity of the pack, he started to remember who he had been before the rejection. He had always been quiet, yes, but that didn't make him weak. His gentle nature had allowed him to comfort those in pain, to mediate disputes, to understand others in ways that brute strength never could. He had been living on roots and stream water for nearly 2 weeks when everything changed. Oren was attempting to fish in a mountain stream, his makeshift spear hovering over the water as he waited for the right moment to strike. The morning was peaceful, filled with the sound of running water and birdsong. He had almost managed to convince himself that this solitary existence might be bearable when the sky exploded. A streak of fire tore across the heavens, burning so bright that it turned day into night and night into day again. The object struck the earth with such force that the ground shook beneath Oren's feet, sending him tumbling into the stream. Trees groaned and cracked as waves of heat washed over the forest, and for a moment, Oren thought the world was ending. When the light faded and the rumbling stopped, Oren pulled himself from the water and stared in amazement at what he saw. Where the object had struck, a crater had been carved into the earth, its edges still glowing with residual heat. And rising from the center of that crater was a figure unlike anything Oren had ever seen. The being was tall and imposing, with features that were almost human but somehow more. His skin had a subtle golden cast to it, as if lit from within by an inner fire. His hair was dark as midnight but shot through with streaks of copper and gold that caught the light. When he moved, there was a predatory grace to his motions that spoke of barely contained power. But it was his eyes that truly marked him as otherworldly. They were the color of molten gold, ancient and knowing, with pupils that seemed to shift and dance like flame. When he smiled, Oren caught a glimpse of teeth that were just slightly too sharp, and when he flexed his hands, his fingernails looked more like claws. The stranger's gaze swept the forest until it settled on Oren, still standing knee-deep in the stream with his crude fishing spear in hand. Those golden eyes studied him with an intensity that made Oren feel exposed, as if all his secrets were being laid bare. "You're not very good at that," the stranger observed, nodding toward Oren's makeshift fishing equipment. His voice had an unusual quality to it, like whispered promises of fire and shadow. There was an accent there too, something old and foreign that Oren couldn't place. "I'm still learning," Oren replied, surprised by how calm he felt in the stranger's presence. Most creatures in this forest radiated danger, but this being felt different. Powerful, yes, but not malevolent. "Learning to fish or learning to survive?" the stranger asked, stepping across the stream with inhuman grace. Up close, Oren could see that his ears came to subtle points and that strange symbols seemed to shift and dance beneath his skin like living tattoos. "Both, I suppose," Oren said honestly. There was something about this being that invited honesty, as if lies would be pointless anyway. "Ah!" The stranger studied him with those flame-colored eyes. "You're not from the forest originally. You smell of pack lands and rejection." Oren tensed, expecting mockery or pity, but the stranger's expression remained neutral, merely curious. "I was exiled," Oren said simply. "And what did you do to earn such punishment?" the stranger asked, tilting his head. "Murder? Theft? Betrayal? I was rejected by my fated mate." The words still hurt to say, but they came out steadier than Oren expected. To his surprise, the stranger laughed, but it wasn't cruel laughter. "That's it?" he said, shaking his head. "You were cast out for someone else's failure of character? Pack politics never cease to amaze me." "You know about pack law?" Oren asked, studying the stranger more carefully. "I know about many things. I am Railgar, keeper of the flame." He gestured toward the deeper parts of the forest. "I deal in knowledge, artifacts, and the occasional lost soul looking for purpose." Something in his tone made Oren look at him more carefully. "Are you offering me something? Perhaps. You have an interesting quality about you, a stillness that speaks of inner strength rather than weakness. And there's something else." Railgar paused, his golden eyes narrowing as he studied Oren. "You have a gift, don't you? Something that sets you apart from other Omegas." Oren nodded slowly. He had never spoken of his abilities to anyone outside his immediate family, but somehow he sensed that Railgar would understand. "I can feel emotions, sometimes even influence them. My pack called it a curse." "A curse?" Railgar's laugh was rich and warm. "My dear boy, that's not a curse. That's one of the rarest gifts in existence. Emotional resonance is incredibly valuable, especially to someone like me." "Someone like you?" Railgar's smile revealed those sharp teeth again. "I am what you might call a dragon, though I prefer this form for most interactions. I have need of someone with your abilities. Someone to help me understand the complexities of mortal emotion, to assist with my research, to provide companionship that doesn't bore me to death." "What would be the terms of such an arrangement?" Oren asked carefully. "Food, shelter, protection from those who would hunt you. In exchange, you work for me. Nothing more complicated than that." Railgar extended his hand, and Oren noticed that his palm was marked with symbols that seemed to shift and dance in the light. "Do we have an agreement?" Oren looked at the offered hand, then back at Railgar's face. In those golden eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen from anyone in weeks. Respect. Not pity, not disgust, not even mere tolerance, but actual respect for who he was and what he could offer. "We have an agreement," Oren said, taking Railgar's hand. The moment their skin touched, Oren felt a jolt of something electric pass between them. It wasn't the mate bond that had been torn away from him forever, but it was something equally powerful. A connection, a recognition, a sense that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. Railgar's dwelling was nothing like what Oren had expected. From the outside, it looked like a massive obsidian tower that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. But inside, it was warm and welcoming, filled with comfortable furniture, walls lined with books and artifacts from across the known world, and windows that showed views of places that definitely weren't the surrounding forest. "Magic," Railgar explained when he saw Oren staring at a window that currently displayed what looked like a tropical beach. The tower exists in several places at once. Convenient for business, if somewhat disorienting for newcomers. Oren's rooms were on the third floor. A bedroom, a small sitting area, and a workspace where he could carry out his duties. They were simple but comfortable, and after weeks of sleeping in caves and under trees, they felt like the height of luxury. What exactly will my work involve? Oren asked as Railgar showed him around. Research, primarily. I'm studying the nature of emotional connections between beings, particularly the bonds that form between different species. Your gift should help you understand the deeper currents behind surface emotions, which is often more important than what people say or do. Railgar paused at a table covered with scrolls and books. There's also some organizing to be done, correspondence to maintain, and the occasional translation project. And then there's the companionship I mentioned. He glanced at Oren, and for a moment, his carefully controlled expression slipped. I have lived for over 2,000 years, Oren. Do you know how difficult it becomes to find conversation that doesn't bore you to tears after the first century? Most beings are so predictable, so limited in their thinking. But you, he studied Oren's face. You might be different. The work was engaging in ways Oren hadn't expected. The ancient texts were filled with wisdom and beauty, stories of love and loss and triumph that resonated across the centuries. His gift helped him understand not just the words but the emotions behind them. The hope of a long-dead poet, the despair of a conquered king, the joy of lovers reunited after years apart. Railgar proved to be an excellent teacher, and as the weeks passed, an increasingly comfortable companion. He was brilliant and well-traveled, with stories that spanned continents and centuries. But more than that, he was kind in ways that were subtle but meaningful. He never mocked Oren's ignorance when he encountered something unfamiliar, never made him feel lesser for being in exile. You don't seem like the dragons from the old stories? Oren told him one evening as they worked together in Railgar's study, translating a particularly complex ritual text. What did the old stories say about dragons? Railgar asked without looking up from his own work. That they were cruel and greedy, that they delighted in hoarding treasure and terrorizing villages, that they saw other beings as nothing more than playthings or prey. Some do, Railgar said matter-of-factly. But then some wolves delight in cruelty as well. Some humans, some elves, some of every species I've encountered. Evil isn't determined by what you are. It's determined by what you choose to do. And what do you choose to do? Railgar was quiet for a long moment. His pen paused over the parchment. I choose to preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost. I choose to help those who seek answers to important questions. And I choose to surround myself with beings who make existence interesting rather than tedious. Is that what I do? Oren asked softly. Make existence interesting? Railgar looked at him then, and Oren saw something warm in those golden eyes. Among other things, yes. As autumn turned to winter, their relationship deepened from professional to something more personal. They shared meals together, worked side by side in comfortable silence, and spent evenings by the fire discussing everything from ancient philosophy to the migration patterns of birds. Oren found himself looking forward to Railgar's company in ways that had nothing to do with employment. It was during one of winter's worst storms that everything changed between them. Oren had been feeling unwell for several days. Not sick exactly, but restless and uncomfortable in his own skin. His scent had been shifting too, becoming sweeter and more intense in ways that made him self-conscious. He tried to hide it, but Railgar's enhanced senses made that impossible. You're going into heat, Railgar said bluntly one morning over breakfast. Oren nearly choked on his tea. I'm what? Heat. It happens to unmated omegas, though usually not as intensely as what you're experiencing. Railgar studied his face with clinical interest. When was your last cycle? I've never had one, Oren admitted, embarrassed. The pack healer said it was because of my bond with Chiron, that my body was waiting for our mating to trigger my first adult cycle. Ah, understanding dawned in Railgar's expression. And now that the bond has been severed, your body is trying to complete its natural development. Inconvenient timing, given the storm. The storm he referenced was indeed severe, wind howling around the tower with enough force to rattle the windows, snow falling so heavily that the world outside had disappeared into white nothingness. Even if Oren wanted to leave to avoid the awkwardness of going through heat near an unmated male, travel was impossible. I can prepare a room on the top floor, Raelgar offered, far enough away that my presence won't exacerbate your condition. There are supplies there, foods that will help, herbs to ease the discomfort. You would do that for me? Oren asked, touched by the offer. Of course. Raelgar looked puzzled by the question. Did you think I would throw you out into a blizzard? The heat hit Oren like a physical blow that afternoon. One moment he was organizing correspondence in his workspace. The next he was doubled over with waves of need that left him gasping. His skin felt like it was on fire, and every nerve ending seemed hypersensitive. The sweet, desperate scent of an omega in heat began to fill the air. Raelgar appeared in his doorway within minutes, his nostrils flaring as he caught Oren's scent. For a moment, his carefully controlled expression slipped, and Oren saw the predator beneath the civilized exterior. But then Raelgar mastered himself, his face becoming a mask of concern. Come, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Let me help you to the upper room. The next 3 days were a blur of fever and need. Raelgar brought him food and water, herbs to ease the worst of the symptoms, cool cloths for his burning skin. He was professional and careful, never taking advantage of Oren's vulnerable state, but Oren could see the strain it put on him. Raelgar's own scent became more intense, responding to Oren's despite his best efforts to remain unaffected. Why aren't you claiming me? Oren asked him on the second night, his mind hazy with heat fever but still curious. I'm unmated, in heat, and you're clearly affected. Most alphas would see this as an opportunity. Because you're not in your right mind, Raelgar said simply, wringing out another cool cloth. And because when you come to my bed, I want it to be your choice, not your biology making the decision for you. When, not if. Oren noticed the phrasing despite his fevered state. Raelgar paused in his ministrations, meeting Oren's eyes. I have grown fond of you, Oren, more fond than is probably wise. But I won't take advantage of your heat to get what I want. When the heat finally broke, Oren felt different. Not just physically, but emotionally. The experience had been intense and overwhelming, but having Raelgar care for him through it had created a bond between them that went beyond employer and employee, beyond even friendship. Thank you, he told Raelgar as he finally emerged from the upper room, clean and dressed and feeling more like himself, for taking care of me, for being honorable. You don't need to thank me for basic decency, Raelgar said, but Oren could see the relief in his expression at having him back. How do you feel? Different, stronger somehow, like I've finally grown into who I was meant to be. Oren studied Raelgar's face, noting the signs of strain and sleepless nights. It was difficult for you too. Yes, Raelgar admitted, but not unbearably so. I'm older than I look, Oren. I have excellent self-control when I choose to exercise it. And if I asked you not to exercise it? Oren stepped closer, close enough to see the way Raelgar's pupils dilated at his nearness. If I told you that what I felt for you had nothing to do with heat and everything to do with the man you've shown yourself to be? Raelgar went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying that I care for you, that these months of working together, of getting to know you, have made me realize that what I had with Chiron was nothing compared to what I could have with you. Oren stepped closer still. I'm saying that if you want me, I'm yours. The kiss Raelgar gave him was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if he couldn't quite believe this was happening. But when Oren responded eagerly, pressing closer and opening his mouth under his, Raelgar deepened it with a passion that made Oren's knees weak. Are you certain? Raelgar asked against his lips. I'm not human, Oren. I'm not even mortal. A relationship with me would be complicated. I'm an exiled Omega with the ability to influence emotions, Oren replied, smiling. I think I can handle complicated. What followed was the most beautiful night of Oren's life. Raelgar made love to him with a patience and skill that left him speechless, worshipping his body like it was something precious rather than just using it for his own pleasure. Through his gift, Oren could feel Raelgar's emotions as clearly as his own. Desire? Yes, but also tenderness, possessiveness, and something deeper that made his heart race. Mine, Raelgar whispered against his throat as he moved within him, his voice rough with feeling. My Omega, my heart, my choice. Yours? Oren agreed, arching beneath him as pleasure built to impossible heights. Always yours. In the morning, Oren woke in Raelgar's arms feeling more complete than he ever had before. This wasn't the desperate pull of a fated bond, but something he had chosen freely, something that was his and Raelgar's alone. No regrets? Raelgar asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on Oren's bare skin. None, Oren said, meaning it completely. Only that it took us so long to get here. Raelgar pressed a kiss to the top of his head. I love you, Oren. I know it's soon to say it, but I've lived long enough to recognize the real thing when I find it. I love you too, Oren whispered, and felt the truth of it resonate through every fiber of his being. Their relationship transformed from that point forward. They were still employer and employee during working hours, but in private they were lovers and partners. Raelgar showed Oren wonders he had never imagined. Other realms accessible through the tower's magic, artifacts that held the power of ancient civilizations, knowledge that had been lost to the world for centuries. But more than that, he showed Oren that he was worthy of love exactly as he was. Not stronger, not different, not improved in any way, just him, with all his quietness and sensitivity and strange gifts. It was during the spring that they encountered Finn. Oren had been exploring the ruins of an old temple about an hour's walk from the tower when he heard crying. Following the sound, he found a small figure huddled in the shadow of a broken wall. A child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with cuts on his arms and terror in his dark eyes. The boy was human, but there was something otherworldly about him. His skin had a subtle luminescence to it, as if he were lit from within by starlight, and when he moved, wisps of silver light seemed to follow him. But his tears were real enough, and the pain radiating from him through Oren's gift was heartbreaking. Hey there, Oren said softly, crouching down to the child's level. Are you hurt? The boy looked up at him with eyes too old for his face. Are you going to hurt me too? He asked in a voice barely above a whisper. No, Oren said firmly. I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Oren. What's yours? Finn, the boy said after a moment of hesitation. I don't have a family name. I don't have a family at all. The story came out in fragments over the following hour. Finn was half human, half star-touched, the result of a union between a human woman and a being from the celestial realm. His mother had died when he was very young, and he had been passed from relative to relative, none of whom wanted to care for a child who reminded them daily of otherworldly influence. The last family said I was cursed, Finn explained, showing Oren the fresh cuts on his arms. They said star-touched children bring bad luck. They hurt me and told me to go away. Looking at this frightened, injured child, Oren felt something fierce and protective awaken in his chest. Well, they were wrong, he said firmly. You're not cursed, and you don't bring bad luck. You're just different, and different doesn't mean wrong. You really think so? I know so. Come on. Let's get those cuts cleaned and see about getting you something to eat. Oren brought Finn back to the tower, expecting to have to convince Raelgar to let him stay temporarily. But when he explained the situation, the dragon's response surprised him. He can stay, Raelgar said immediately, kneeling down to examine Finn's injuries with gentle hands. Star-touched children are rare and often misunderstood. It would be a crime to let him suffer for something he had no control over. Really? Finn looked between them with hope beginning to replace the fear in his eyes. I can stay here? If you want to, Oren said. We can't offer you a traditional family, but we can offer you safety and care and people who won't hurt you for being different. That night, as they settled Finn into a room near Oren's, Railgar pulled him aside. Are you certain about this? He asked quietly. Caring for a child is a significant responsibility. I'm certain, Oren said without hesitation. Railgar, I know what it's like to be rejected for things you can't help. I won't let that happen to him if I can prevent it. And what if his presence here attracts attention? Star-touched children have enemies, and not all of them will be impressed by our good intentions. Then we'll protect him, Oren said simply. All of us together. Railgar studied his face for a long moment, then smiled. You continue to surprise me, my heart. Yes, we'll protect him. All of us together. Finn brought light into their lives in ways Oren hadn't expected. His initial fear gradually gave way to curiosity and then to genuine joy as he realized that they truly meant to keep him safe. He was incredibly intelligent, absorbing knowledge like a sponge and asking questions that kept both Railgar and Oren on their toes. Why do people fear star-touched children? Finn asked one evening as the three of them sat by the fire, Railgar reading aloud from a book of fairy tales. Because they don't understand them, Railgar explained patiently. Star-touched children have abilities that seem strange to those who live entirely in the mundane world. Some people fear anything they don't understand. But you're not afraid of me.
No.
We're not, Oren said, pulling Finn closer against his side. We think your abilities are interesting, not frightening. Can you show us? Railgar asked gently. Only if you want to, of course. Finn looked between them uncertainly, then seemed to make up his mind. He held up his hand, and slowly, points of light began to gather around his fingers like tiny stars. With careful concentration, he shaped them into small figures. A wolf, a bird, a flower, each one perfectly detailed despite being made of nothing but light. That's incredible, Oren breathed, watching the star wolf pad across Finn's palm. You're an artist, Finn. You think so? The boy's face lit up with pride. The other families said it was creepy. The other families were idiots, Railgar said firmly. Beauty comes in many forms, and yours is unique and wonderful. Over the following months, they settled into life as an unlikely family. Railgar continued his work as a keeper of knowledge and dealer in artifacts. Oren assisted with translations and research, and Finn served as their apprentice and, more importantly, the heart of their strange household. But their peaceful existence was shattered one autumn morning when strangers appeared at their door. Oren sensed them before they knocked. The familiar pack scent of home mixed with anger and suspicion. Through his gift, he could hear their emotions clearly. Disgust, fear, righteous indignation, and underneath it all, a familiar presence that made his chest tighten with old pain. Pack wolves, he told Railgar and Finn as they gathered in the main hall. At least 6 of them, possibly more. They're not here for a friendly visit. Can you tell what they want? Railgar asked, his demeanor shifting into something more dangerous. Me, I think. They're angry about something they blame on me. Oren took a deep breath, steeling himself. I should probably talk to them. We talk to them, Railgar corrected firmly. You're not facing your former pack alone. When they opened the door, Oren found himself face to face with members of his old pack, led by someone he had hoped never to see again. Chiron stood at the front of the group, looking every inch the proud alpha, his winterstorm eyes hard with condemnation. Oren, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. Or do you still use that name, despite bringing shame to it? I use the name I was born with, Oren replied, proud that his voice remained steady. What do you want, Chiron? We want answers. The Borderlands have been experiencing magical disturbances for months. Twisted creatures, corrupted plants, reality itself seeming to bend in unnatural ways. The trail leads here, to this tower, to your new associates. His gaze shifted to Railgar, and Oren saw recognition flicker in his eyes. He knew what Railgar was, and he didn't like it. You live with monsters now, one of the other pack members spat. You've betrayed everything our people stand for. I live with someone who treats me with respect and kindness, Oren replied. Something I never received from the pack. Respect. Chiron laughed harshly. What respect does a dragon show its pet? You're nothing but a plaything to him, a curiosity to be used until he grows bored. The insult to both him and Railgar made anger flare in Orin's chest. But before he could respond, Railgar stepped forward. The temperature around them seemed to rise several degrees, and Orin caught a glimpse of flames flickering in his golden eyes. You will not speak to him that way, Railgar said, his voice carrying undertones of power that made even the Alpha Pack members shift nervously. Orin is my chosen mate, my partner in all things, and he deserves respect from anyone who enters my domain. Chosen mate. Karen's expression twisted with something that might have been jealousy. You mean claimed property. Dragons don't form bonds. They take what they want and discard it when they're finished. You seem to be confusing dragons with werewolf alphas, Railgar replied coolly. I chose Orin, and he chose me in return. Neither of us was coerced. Neither of us was desperate. And neither of us settled for less than we deserved. The barb hit its mark. Karen's face darkened with rage, and several of the pack members behind him growled low in their throats. You've corrupted him, Chiron snarled. Turned him against his own kind with your dark magic. I didn't turn him against anything, Railgar said. Your pack managed that all on their own when they cast out one of their most valuable members for the crime of being rejected by a coward. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth. Railgar's power was becoming more visible now, flames wreathing his hands as his calm facade began to crack. You rejected your fated mate, publicly humiliated him in front of his entire community, and then allowed that community to exile him for your failure. And now you have the audacity to come here and suggest that he's the one who chose betrayal. The confrontation might have escalated into violence, but Finn chose that moment to appear in the doorway behind them. The pack members reacted to his presence with visible alarm. Star-touched children were the stuff of nightmares to most werewolves. Orin. Finn's voice was small and frightened. Are these the bad people who hurt you before? Not all of them, Orin said gently, kneeling down to Finn's level. Some of them, yes, but don't worry. They're not going to hurt any of us. The child is star-touched. One of the pack members whispered, and Orin heard the fear in his voice. The corruption is spreading. First the Omega consorting with dragons. Now they're harboring abominations. He's not an abomination, Orin said, standing and placing a protective hand on Finn's shoulder. He's a little boy who needed a home and people who would care for him. We gave him both. This ends now, Chiron declared, his alpha authority making his voice carry across the clearing. You will return with us to face judgment for the magical contamination you've caused. The dragon will be banished from Packlands, and the star-touched creature will be dealt with according to ancient law. Ancient law? Orin felt ice form in his veins. You mean you want to kill him? Star-touched children are abominations that corrupt everything they touch. It would be a mercy. The protective rage that swept through Orin was unlike anything he had ever experienced. This sweet, intelligent child who had brought so much joy into their lives. They wanted to murder him simply for existing. No, Orin said, and his voice carried power he didn't know he possessed. You will not touch him. You will not threaten him. And you will leave our home immediately. Your home. Chiron stepped closer, trying to use his size and alpha presence to intimidate Orin. You have no home, Omega. You were cast out, rejected, abandoned. You're nothing but a stray that a dragon decided to keep as a pet. I am more than I ever was when I lived among the pack, Orin replied, meeting his gaze steadily. I have work that matters, love that fulfills me, and a family that shows me freely what they feel. What do you have, Chiron? A pack that fears you more than they respect you? Leadership built on intimidation rather than inspiration? A life so empty that you have to travel for days just to hurt someone who never wronged you. Through his gift, Orin could hear Karen's emotions clearly now. Rage? Yes, but also pain and regret and a loneliness that matched what Orin had felt during his own exile. Chiron had made his choice at the bonding ceremony. but it hadn't brought him the satisfaction he had expected. I made the right choice, Chiron said, but there was doubt in his voice. The pack needs strong leadership. The pack needs wise leadership, Orin corrected. Strength without wisdom is just brutality. And brutality is what you're proposing now. The murder of a child whose only crime is being different. It's not murder. It's protection. Whose protection? Orin stepped forward, no longer the timid Omega who had been broken by rejection. The pack is miles away from here. Finn has never set foot on pack lands, has never threatened anyone, has never done anything but try to survive in a world that hates him for circumstances beyond his control. He paused. You want to kill him because his existence makes you uncomfortable. That's not protection. That's cowardice. The words hit Chiron like physical blows, and Orin saw him flinch. Around them, the other pack members were shifting nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the confrontation was taking. The magical disturbances. One of them began, but Railgar interrupted. Have nothing to do with us. I've been monitoring the magical climate of this region for months. The disturbances you're experiencing are coming from the northern mountains, not from this tower. There's an old nexus point there that's becoming unstable. If you want to solve your problem, that's where you need to look. You're lying. I'm a 2,000-year-old dragon who has made the study of magic his life's work, Railgar replied dryly. You're a werewolf who probably doesn't know the difference between active magic and residual traces. Which of us do you think is more qualified to make this assessment? The truth of his words was obvious to everyone present, but Chiron wasn't ready to back down. His pride and his prejudices were too deeply entrenched. Even if that's true, he said, it doesn't change what you are, what all of you are. Unnatural. Wrong. A corruption that needs to be cleansed. If we're so unnatural, Orin asked quietly, then why are we happy? Why do we care for each other, protect each other, love each other? Why does our home feel more like a family than your pack ever did? The question caught Chiron off guard. Through his gift, Orin felt his confusion, his inability to reconcile his prejudices with the evidence in front of him. They weren't the monsters he had expected to find. They were just people who had found each other and chosen to build something beautiful together. Because dragons are skilled at deception, Chiron said finally, but the conviction was gone from his voice. Is that what you see when you look at us? Orin asked. Deception? Or do you see what you lost when you made your choice at the bonding ceremony? I lost nothing, Chiron snapped. I made the right choice for my pack. Did you? Or did you make the choice that felt safer? The choice that didn't require you to be vulnerable, to open your heart, to risk being hurt. Orin studied his face, seeing the pain Chiron was trying so hard to hide. I know what it feels like to be afraid, Chiron. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. And you think running away to live with dragons was courageous? I think building a new life from nothing was courageous. I think opening my heart to love again after being rejected was courageous. I think protecting a child who has no one else was courageous. Orin glanced back at Railgar and Finn, drawing strength from their presence. But most of all, I think choosing love over hate, acceptance over prejudice, and hope over despair was courageous. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. Orin could feel the conflict raging within Chiron. His alpha training warring with his personal desires, his prejudices battling against the evidence of his own eyes. This isn't over, Chiron said finally, but the threat sounded hollow. The pack will not tolerate this corruption on our borders. Then the pack will have to learn tolerance, Railgar said firmly, because we're not going anywhere. This is our home, and we will defend it against anyone who threatens our family. Family? Karen's voice was bitter. You call this aberration a family? Yes, Orin said simply, because that's what it is. Not bound by blood or born from traditional bonds, but chosen freely and maintained through love and mutual respect. It's not the family I expected to have, but it's the one I choose every day. As if to emphasize his words, Finn stepped forward and took Orin's hand, his small fingers interlacing with his. The gesture was simple but powerful, a child choosing his protector, demonstrating the bonds that held their unusual household together. "We choose each other," Finn said quietly, his young voice carrying surprising strength. "Every day we choose to be a family. Isn't that what love is supposed to be?" The innocence and wisdom in his words seemed to pierce through even Karen's defenses. For a moment, his harsh expression softened, and Oren caught a glimpse of the man he might have been if fear and pride hadn't ruled his choices. But the moment passed quickly as Chiron reasserted his alpha persona. "You have 1 week," he said. "1 week to leave this territory and take your family with you. If you're still here after that, we'll consider you a hostile threat and act accordingly." "We're not leaving," Oren said calmly. "This is our home. We've built a life here, and we're not abandoning it because of threats from people who have no authority over us." "Then you've chosen your fate." Chiron turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Oren. I had thought perhaps there was still time to salvage something from the bond we once shared. But I can see now that the corruption runs too deep." "There never was a bond between us," Oren replied. "You made sure of that. What you're mourning isn't what we had. It's what you threw away." After the pack left, the three of them stood together in the doorway, watching them disappear into the forest. Oren felt drained by the confrontation but also strangely liberated. He had faced his past and stood up to it, had defended the life he had chosen without apology or compromise. "Are they really going to come back and hurt us?" Finn asked, his voice smaller than usual. "They might try," Raelgar said honestly. "But if they do, we'll be ready for them." "How can we be ready for a whole pack?" Oren asked. "There are only 3 of us. 3 of us with very particular skills," Raelgar corrected. "You can hear their intentions before they act on them. I have magic powerful enough to level mountains if necessary. And Finn has abilities they don't understand and can't predict." "You really think we can defend ourselves?" "I think we can do more than that," Raelgar said, his golden eyes glowing with fierce determination. "I think we can show them that different doesn't mean wrong, that chosen families can be just as strong as blood families, and that love is more powerful than hate. And if we can't convince them, then we protect what matters most to us," he said simply. "By any means necessary." The week that followed was tense but productive. Raelgar began teaching both Oren and Finn defensive magic, skills that could help them protect themselves and each other if violence became unavoidable. Oren worked on expanding his gift, learning to project emotions as well as read them, while Finn practiced controlling his star-touched abilities with increasing sophistication. But more than preparing for conflict, they used the time to strengthen the bonds between them. They talked about what their family meant to each of them, what they were willing to sacrifice to protect it, and what kind of future they wanted to build together. "I've never had a real family before," Finn told them one evening as they sat together by the fire. "Not one that wanted me around. I thought there was something wrong with me." "There's nothing wrong with you," Oren assured him. "You're exactly who you're supposed to be. Even if I'm different?" "Especially because you're different," Raelgar said. "Difference is what makes life interesting. Conformity is overrated." "Is that why you chose Oren?" Finn asked with the directness that only children possess. "Because he's different?" Raelgar looked at Oren, his expression soft with affection. "I chose Oren because he's kind and intelligent and brave, because he sees beauty where others see only strangeness, because he makes me want to be better than I am." He reached over and took Oren's hand. "And yes, because he's different from anyone I've ever known." "And you chose him too, right, Oren?" Finn pressed. "Even though people said it was wrong?" "I chose him because he makes me feel valued and loved and whole," Oren said. "Because he never asked me to be someone I'm not. Because he accepted all of me. The gifts, the scars, the fears, everything. That's what real love is supposed to be like," Finn said with the wisdom of someone far older than his years. "Accepting all the pieces, even the weird ones." The pack returned on the 8th day, just as dawn was breaking over the forest. But this time they didn't come alone. Oren sensed them long before they became visible. Dozens of wolves, far more than had come the first time. Through his gift, he could hear their emotions, determination, fear, anger, and underneath it all, the kind of righteous certainty that made people capable of terrible things. They've brought the entire pack, Orin told Raelgar and Finn as they prepared for the confrontation. This isn't a negotiation anymore. They're here for war. Then war is what they'll get, Raelgar said grimly. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by something far more dangerous, and flames danced around his fingers as he spoke. I won't let them hurt our family. When the pack emerged from the tree line, Orin was stunned by their numbers. Nearly 50 wolves in human form, armed with traditional weapons and arranged in fighting formation. At their head walked Chiron, his face set in lines of grim determination. You were given a chance to leave peacefully, he called out as they approached the tower. You chose to stay. Now you face the consequences. The consequences of what? Orin called back. Of finding happiness? Of building a family? Of refusing to be ashamed of who we are? The consequences of corruption, another voice answered. Orin recognized him as one of the pack's spiritual leaders, an elder who had always been suspicious of anything that didn't fit into traditional categories. You consort with dragons, harbor star-touched abominations, and practice unnatural magic. Your very existence is an affront to the natural order. What's unnatural about love? Finn asked, stepping forward with more courage than any child should have to show. What's wrong with taking care of each other? You are an abomination, the elder said harshly. Star-touched children are born from the union of light and chaos, order and madness. You represent everything that should not be. He represents hope, Orin said firmly. He represents the possibility that different kinds of beings can coexist peacefully. He represents love transcending boundaries. Enough words, Chiron interrupted. You've had your chance to see reason. Stand aside, dragon, and let us cleanse this corruption.
No.
Raelgar's voice carried such power that several of the pack members actually took steps backward. You will not touch him. You will not touch either of them. They are under my protection, and I will destroy anyone who threatens them. You're outnumbered 50-3, Chiron pointed out. Powerful or not, you can't fight all of us. Perhaps not, Raelgar agreed. But I can make sure that anyone who survives will remember the cost of threatening my family. The battle that followed was unlike anything Orin had ever witnessed. Raelgar's magic was devastating. Flames that could melt steel, barriers that could deflect the strongest attacks, illusions that turned the pack's numbers against them. But he was vastly outnumbered, and even his considerable power had limits. Orin did what he could to help, using his gift to anticipate attacks and warn Raelgar of threats he couldn't see. Finn contributed too, using his star-touched abilities to confuse and disorient their attackers, creating bursts of blinding light and illusions that made it difficult for the wolves to coordinate their assault. But they were still just 3 against 50, and gradually, inevitably, they began to be overwhelmed. It was when one of the pack members broke through their defenses and lunged toward Finn with a silver blade that something inside Orin snapped. The protective rage that had been building throughout the fight suddenly exploded outward, and Orin felt power flow through him like nothing he had ever experienced. His gift, which had always been passive, suddenly became active. Instead of just hearing emotions, he began projecting them. Waves of fear, confusion, and despair that struck the attacking wolves like physical blows. Several of them dropped their weapons and fled. Others fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught of foreign emotions. Stop, Orin commanded, and his voice carried power that made even Chiron pause mid-attack. This ends now. Orin, Raelgar looked at him with amazement. How are you doing this? I don't know, Orin admitted, but I can feel all of them. Their fears, their doubts, their secret shames, and I can make them feel what I felt, what we've all felt. He turned his attention to the pack, projecting the emotions he had experienced during his exile. The loneliness, the rejection, the despair of being cast out by those who should have cared for him. One by one, the wolves began to lower their weapons as they experienced firsthand what their actions had caused. This is what you did to me, Orin said, his voice carrying to every member of the pack. This is what your prejudice and fear created. This is the pain you caused because you couldn't accept someone who was different. But he didn't stop there. He also projected the joy he had found with Railgar and Finn. The warmth of acceptance, the security of unconditional love, the happiness of being valued for who he truly was. He let them feel what it was like to be part of a family that chose each other daily, that supported each other through difficulties, that celebrated each other's differences instead of fearing them. And this is what you could have, he continued. This is what love looks like when it's not constrained by tradition or prejudice. This is what family feels like when it's built on acceptance rather than conformity. The effect on the pack was profound. Many of them were weeping openly, overwhelmed by the intensity of the emotions Orin was sharing. Others looked around with new understanding, seeing their companions not as part of a unified force, but as individuals with their own fears and desires. But Chiron, whether through alpha stubbornness or genuine resistance to Orin's power, remained standing. Enough, he snarled, raising his weapon. I won't be swayed by dragon magic and Omega manipulation. This isn't magic, Orin said sadly. This is truth. This is what you threw away when you rejected our bond. This is what you've been missing all these years. I chose strength over weakness, Chiron insisted. I chose the good of the pack over personal desire. You chose fear over love, Orin corrected. And fear has made you into something your pack doesn't even recognize anymore. To prove his point, Orin projected Karen's emotions outward, letting the other pack members feel what was really driving their alpha. Not noble dedication to duty, but terror of vulnerability, fear of being seen as weak, and a loneliness so profound it was like a physical wound. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Several pack members stepped away from Chiron, their expressions shifting from loyalty to pity. Others began to question out loud whether following him into this fight had been the right choice. You see, Orin said gently, he's not the strong leader you think he is. He's a frightened man who has spent so long hiding his fears that he's forgotten how to be anything else. Stop, Chiron whispered, and for the first time since Orin had known him, his voice broke. Please, just stop. Orin could have continued. He could have destroyed Chiron completely, laid bare every secret shame and hidden weakness until he was broken beyond repair. But as he looked at him, really looked at him, he saw not the alpha who had rejected him, but a man who had been trapped by his own fears for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be free. I forgive you, Orin said quietly, and he meant it. I forgive you for the rejection, for the pain, for trying to destroy the happiness I found after you threw me away. But I won't let you hurt my family. The power he had been wielding gradually subsided, leaving him exhausted but strangely at peace. Around them, the members of the pack were picking themselves up, looking around with the confused expressions of people waking from a shared dream. The corruption they spoke of, one of them said slowly, I don't see it. I see love. Real love, freely given and freely received. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe different doesn't always mean dangerous, another added. Maybe we've been so afraid of change that we've forgotten what we're supposed to be protecting. Chiron looked around at his pack, his followers who were now questioning everything he had taught them, and Orin saw something break inside him. Not his spirit, but the rigid control that had been strangling his heart for so long. I was wrong, he said, his voice barely audible. About all of it. About you, about what strength really means, about what the pack needs. He looked directly at Orin. I was a coward, and I made you pay for my cowardice. You were afraid, Orin said. There's a difference. Is there? I hurt you because I was too scared to admit that I loved you. I led my pack here to hurt your family because I was too proud to admit that I had made a mistake. Chiron dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. I have no right to ask, but can you ever forgive me? Looking down at him, this man who had once seemed so powerful and intimidating, Orin felt the last of his anger fade away. Chiron wasn't his enemy anymore. He was just someone who had been trapped by his own limitations until they had nearly destroyed everything good in his life. I already have, Orin said. But Chiron, Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending that what happened didn't matter. And it doesn't mean I'm coming back. I know, Chiron said. I wouldn't ask that of you. You found something here that I could never give you. Something I was too broken to even understand. He looked over at Raelgar and Finn. They're your real family now. Yes, they are. Chiron nodded slowly, then stood and turned to address his pack. We're leaving, he announced. There's no corruption here. No threat to our lands or our people. There's just a family trying to live in peace, and we have no right to disturb that. But Alpha, one of the younger pack members protested. The elders said. The elders were wrong, Chiron said firmly. And so was I. We came here looking for monsters and found only love. That should tell us something about our own hearts. As the pack began to disperse, preparing to return to their own territory, Chiron approached Orin one last time. I want you to know, he said quietly, that seeing you happy, it means everything to me. I destroyed our bond because I thought it would make me stronger, but all it did was make me empty. You deserve the love you found here. You deserve love too, Orin told him. Real love, with someone who sees all of you and chooses you anyway. But you'll never find it until you stop being afraid of your own heart. Maybe someday, Chiron said with a sad smile. But for now, I need to learn how to be the kind of leader my pack actually needs, not the kind I thought they wanted. After the pack was gone, the three of them stood together in the clearing around their tower, processing what had just happened. The confrontation that they had feared would destroy them had instead revealed strengths they didn't know they possessed and confirmed the depth of the bonds between them. That was incredible, Finn said, his eyes shining with admiration. Orin, I didn't know you could do that with your gift. Neither did I, Orin admitted. I think it was something that only became possible because I had something worth protecting. The power of love, Raelgar said, wrapping his arms around both Orin and Finn. It's the oldest magic in existence, and often the strongest. Are they really gone for good? Finn asked. Or will they change their minds and come back? I don't think they'll be back, Orin said. But even if they are, we'll be ready. We're stronger together than any of us are alone. Speaking of being together, Raelgar said, his tone becoming more formal, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with both of you. Orin and Finn looked at him curiously. Orin and I have been bonded in all but the most official sense, he continued. We love each other. We've committed to building a life together, and we've sworn to protect and care for each other. But there's never been a formal ceremony, a public declaration of our choice. Orin's heart began to race as he realized where Raelgar was going with this. I know that dragon bonding customs are different from werewolf traditions, Raelgar said, taking Orin's hands in his. But I want everyone to know that what we have is real and permanent. I want to make it official. Are you asking me to marry you? Orin asked, hardly daring to believe it. I'm asking you to be my partner in every sense of the word, Raelgar said. To bind our lives together formally and completely. To make the family we've created official and recognized. What about me? Finn asked, and Orin could hear the worry in his voice. Would I still belong here? You would be our son, Raelgar said firmly. Not by blood, but by choice. If you want that. I want that more than anything, Finn whispered, tears of joy streaming down his face. Then yes, Orin said, his own eyes filling with tears. Yes, I want to marry you. I want to make this official. I want the whole world to know that we chose each other. The ceremony they planned was unlike anything that had ever been performed before. It combined elements from dragon bonding traditions, werewolf pack customs, and rituals from Finn's star-touched heritage, creating something entirely unique to their family. They held it at the autumn equinox, when day and night were perfectly balanced. A symbol of the harmony they had found between different worlds and different kinds of love. The ceremony took place in the clearing around their tower, decorated with flowers and candles and symbols from all their various traditions. There were no guests in the traditional sense. They had no family or friends to invite, no community that fully accepted all of them. But the forest itself seemed to approve of their union. Birds gathered in the trees to witness their vows, and even some of the forest's more magical residents appeared at the edges of the clearing, drawn by the power of the emotions they were sharing. I choose you, Orin said to Raelgar as they stood together beneath the stars. Not because fate decreed it, but because you showed me what love really looks like. You gave me a home when I had none, purpose when I felt worthless, and a family when I thought I would always be alone. I choose you, Raelgar replied, because you brought light into a life that had grown dark with loneliness, because you showed me that strength comes in many forms, and the gentlest heart can be the bravest of all. They exchanged rings forged from metals that had been touched by both dragon fire and starlight, symbols of the different worlds they came from and the new world they were creating together. Then they turned to Finn, who was practically vibrating with excitement. And we choose you, they said together, as our son, our family, our heart. We promise to love you, protect you, and support you as you grow into whoever you're meant to become. I choose both of you too, Finn said solemnly, as my fathers, my family, my home. I promise to love you and help you and make our family proud. The moment the final vows were spoken, something shifted in the air around them. It wasn't magic exactly, but it was power of a different kind. The power of commitment freely given, of love consciously chosen, of family deliberately created. It's done, Raelgar said softly. We're officially a family now. We were always a family, Orin corrected. Now we just have the paperwork to prove it. That night, as they celebrated their new status with a feast prepared from Finn's favorite foods and Raelgar's most prized wines, Orin reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. A year ago, he had been a broken Omega with no home, no hope, and no future. Now he was a married man with a family he adored and work that fulfilled him. Any regrets? Raelgar asked as they sat together, watching Finn play with his starlight creatures, their forms dancing in the firelight. Only that it took us so long to make it official, Orin said. Only that I waited so long to find you, Raelgar replied. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps we both needed to become who we were meant to be before we could recognize each other. Do you think Finn feels the same way about belonging here? Orin asked. I mean, as if summoned by their conversation. Finn looked up from his play and smiled at them with pure joy. I can hear you talking about me, he said with the uncanny perception that children sometimes possess. And yes, I feel like I belong here. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Good, Raelgar said firmly, because you are exactly where you're supposed to be. All of us are. Looking around at their strange, wonderful family, a rejected Omega, an ancient dragon, and a star-touched child, Orin had to agree. They weren't what anyone would have expected, weren't what tradition would have prescribed, but they were exactly what each of them needed. They were home. Years passed, and their family continued to grow and evolve. Word of their unusual household spread throughout the supernatural community, and they began to receive visitors. Other outcasts and exiles seeking sanctuary, scholars interested in their unique dynamic, even former enemies who had reconsidered their prejudices. Some stayed only briefly, finding what they needed and moving on. Others became permanent residents, adding their own unique gifts to the growing community that had formed around the tower. What had started as a home for 3 had become a haven for dozens, a place where difference was celebrated rather than feared. Orin often found himself serving as a mediator and counselor, his empathic abilities helping to resolve conflicts and ease the integration of new arrivals. Raelgar continued his scholarly work, now with the assistance of beings from multiple realms who brought their own knowledge and perspectives. Finn, growing into his teenage years, had become something of a bridge between the various communities, his natural charisma and unique heritage allowing him to connect with beings others found intimidating or incomprehensible. Look at what we've built, Orin said one evening as they stood on their balcony, watching the lights of their expanded community twinkle below. A year ago, it was just the 3 of us. Now we're the heart of something bigger, Raelgar finished. A place where love transcends boundaries, where family is defined by choice rather than blood, where being different is seen as a gift rather than a curse. Do you think it will last? Finn asked. He was 16 now, tall and graceful, his star-touched heritage more pronounced as he grew older. His abilities had developed tremendously, allowing him to commune with beings from realms most people couldn't even imagine. I think, Orin said, pulling both of his loved ones close, that every generation will have to choose love over fear, acceptance over prejudice, hope over despair. But we've proven that it's possible. We've shown that different kinds of beings can not only coexist but thrive together. And that knowledge, that example, will outlive us all. Besides, Railgar added with a smile, we've got quite a few years left to keep setting that example. Dragons live a very long time, and I intend to spend every moment of mine with my family. As they stood together, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Orin felt a profound sense of peace and completion. The Omega, who had been rejected for being too weak, had become a cornerstone of a community built on strength through diversity. The love that had been dismissed as impossible had proven to be transformative, not just for him and Railgar, but for everyone whose lives they had touched. And this, he knew, was only the beginning. Their story would continue, would inspire others, would ripple outward in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The rejected Omega and the ancient dragon, together with their star-touched son and all the other beautiful, complicated, wonderful souls who had found refuge in their home, would keep writing new chapters in the ongoing story of love conquering fear. In the end, that was enough. It was everything.